No one expected 16-year-old Brielle to turn a cruel cafeteria insult into a moment that would shake the entire school. But that's exactly what she did. The cafeteria was a mosaic of cliques, athletes at one table, theatre kids at another, and everyone else, staking claims to their little islands of familiarity. In the midst of the chaos, 16-year-old Brielle sat at her usual spot, near the window, where sunlight caught the braids framing her face. She liked this corner. It was quieter here, easier to escape the noise without feeling completely invisible. Brielle had learned early that standing out wasn't always a good thing. Being one of the few black students in a predominantly white school, her confidence was often mistaken for arrogance, her laughter for something too loud, her very existence for a challenge. Still she smiled, her warm brown eyes scanning her surroundings as she opened her lunch, homemade jambalaya still warm in its container. Across the room she caught snippets of conversations, whispers about last weekend's football game, someone recounting a party, typical high school chatter. She took a bite and focused on the view outside. The campus courtyard stretched wide, and the trees swayed gently in the early fall breeze. Brielle had gotten good at fading into the background, keeping her head low to avoid giving anyone a reason to bother her. But peace never lasted long. It started subtly, like a storm brewing on the horizon. A group of juniors, Jason, Mira and their friends, were huddled a few tables away. Their laughter grew louder, sharper, cutting through the air like a blade. Brielle didn't need to turn around to know they were talking about her. She'd felt that kind of attention before, to dark right. Jason's voice carried across the room, deliberately loud. You'd think she'd get it by now. Brielle froze for a second, her fork hovering mid-air. The sting of the words hit her, but she quickly masked it, setting her utensil down with care. She turned slightly, catching Jason's smug grin and Mia's poorly disguised snicker. A few other kids nearby looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Most just pretended they hadn't heard. The air in the cafeteria seemed to shift. Brielle felt it, the weight of eyes on her, some curious, others amused, but none coming to her defense. Her heart raced, but her expression remained calm. She had learned to weather moments like these, swallowing her hurt and letting the day go on as if nothing had happened. But this time something was different. This time the insult felt heavier, more deliberate, as if they wanted a reaction. Jason leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. What? No comeback, nothing to say? But Brielle wasn't going to let this slide. Not today. The cafeteria buzz softened as more heads turned toward Brielle and Jason's table. Conversations dwindled, forks paused mid-air, and a charged silence filled the room. It was as if everyone collectively held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Brielle's grip tightened on her fork, her mind racing. She had a choice: ignore it and let the moment pass, or confront it head on. Jason smirked, leaning forward as if to challenge her. What's wrong, Brielle? Cat got your tongue? Or maybe it's hard to talk when you're Jason. Stop, someone muttered from his table. It was Mia, her voice barely audible, though her half-hearted plea did little to deter him. Jason raised an eyebrow and looked around, clearly enjoying the attention. What? I'm just being honest. Brielle took a slow breath, setting her fork down deliberately. She pushed her lunch aside and stood, her chair scraping the tile floor. Her movements were measured, her expression unreadable. All eyes were on her now, but her focus was solely on Jason. Honest, she repeated, her voice calm, yet cutting through the room like a sharp edge. You call that honesty? Jason laughed, though it sounded forced. Yeah, someone had to say it. The murmurs in the room grew louder, a mix of whispers and gasps. Brielle took a step closer to his table, her stance firm, unshaken. The room seemed to shrink, every corner pulling into this single moment. You think you're brave? Brielle asked, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of strength that silenced the whispers. Standing here surrounded by your little group, thinking you can tear someone down because you feel small inside. The smirk faltered on Jason's face. What are you even talking about? Oh, I'm sorry. Brielle continued, her tone cool, but her words fiery. Did I use too many big words for you? Let me make it simple. You're insecure. Jason, and instead of fixing what's broken in you, you try to break people like me. But let me tell you something. You're not special." The cafeteria was dead silent now. Even the lunch monitors, who usually stayed detached from the teenage drama, were frozen, their eyes glued to the scene. Jason shifted in his seat, his cocky demeanor cracking under the weight of her words. "But you think it's funny, don't you?" Brielle said, her voice rising just enough to command the room. "Making jokes about my skin, as if I don't already know what you think of me, as if I haven't heard it 100 times before from people like you." Jason opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He looked around at his friends for backup, but Mia avoided his gaze and the others stayed silent. But Brielle wasn't finished yet. This was her moment to turn the tables. Brielle stepped closer, the tension in the room crackling like static electricity. Every eye was on her, but her focus remained locked on Jason. She tilted her head slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips, not one of amusement but one of quiet confidence. "You know what's funny, Jason?" she said, her tone shifting sharper now. "How you can sit there so sure of yourself, thinking your words have power over me. But let me tell you something you don't understand." She paused, letting her words settle like stones dropped into water. "My skin, this," she gestured to herself, "is beautiful. It carries history, strength, resilience. You don't get to decide what it means. And you definitely don't get to make me feel ashamed of it." Jason's face flushed, his bravado crumbling. The cafeteria was eerily quiet, the kind of silence where even a whisper would echo. Brielle wasn't just addressing him anymore. Her voice carried across the room, reaching everyone who had ever stayed silent. "In the face of cruelty, you make fun of me because I'm different," she continued, her voice unwavering. "But you know what I see? Someone who's scared of what they don't understand. Someone who's so desperate for attention that they'll tear someone else down just to feel bigger. That's not strength, Jason. That's weakness." A murmur rippled through the cafeteria. A few students nodded subtly, their expressions shifting from indifference to admiration. Jason glanced around nervously, realizing the tide was turning against him. "And let me ask you this," Brielle said, taking a step closer. "What exactly do you gain by trying to humiliate me? Does it make you feel better about yourself? Does it fix whatever's missing in your life?" Jason stammered, I didn't mean it like that." "Didn't mean it," Brielle shot back, her voice rising slightly. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted to make me feel small. But guess what? It didn't work. It never will." The crowd was captivated, hanging on her every word. Even the kids, who usually avoided confrontation, couldn't look away. Brielle's confidence was magnetic, her words piercing through the room like a spotlight, cutting through darkness. "But here's the thing, Jason," Brielle said, softening her tone slightly, but keeping her edge. "You don't get to write my story. I do, and in my story, I'm not the victim, I'm the hero. I stand up, I speak out, and I make people like you realize just how small your words really are." For a moment no one moved. The cafeteria seemed frozen in time, the weight of Brielle's words hanging in the air. Then slowly a few students began clapping. It started hesitantly but grew louder, spreading through the room like wildfire. Brielle didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply stood tall, her expression calm, her gaze steady. Jason shrank in his seat, his confidence completely gone. Mia glanced at him, then back at Brielle, her own expression unreadable. But Brielle wasn't just standing up for herself. She was standing up for everyone who had ever felt like they didn't belong. The applause echoed across the cafeteria, breaking the tense silence. It wasn't the whole room, but it was enough to make a statement. Brielle didn't need validation, but hearing the claps, seeing a few nods of support from unexpected faces, it reminded her she wasn't entirely alone. Jason sank further into his chair, his earlier confidence gone. He looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. his face red with embarrassment. Even Mia, who had laughed moments ago, shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with Brill and anyone else. As Brill turned back to her table, someone called out, "You're amazing, Brill." She didn't recognize the voice, but it came from a table she'd never associated with before, a group of quieter students who usually kept to themselves. Her lips curved into a small smile, not of triumph but of gratitude. Still, she didn't let herself linger in the moment too long. The rest of the cafeteria slowly began. Returning to normal, conversations resumed, albeit at a quieter volume. People ate, joked and carried on, but the atmosphere had shifted. It was as if Brill's stand had left an invisible ripple across the room, an unspoken reminder that silence wasn't always the right choice. But Jason wasn't quite ready to let it go. He muttered something under his breath, just loud enough for Brill to catch it. As she passed his table, "Drama Queen," he scoffed, shaking his head. She stopped in her tracks, turning back to face him one last time. This time her expression wasn't anger or defiance. It was pity. "If standing up for myself makes me a drama queen," she said calmly, "then I'll wear the crown. You should try it sometime. It's better than hiding behind insults." Jason didn't respond. His friends avoided his gaze. Clearly uncomfortable, Mia grabbed her tray and stood, muttering something about needing to get to class early. One by one his table began to disperse, leaving Jason alone in his seat. Brill returned to her table and picked up her fork, resuming her meal as if nothing had happened. Her hands trembled slightly, the adrenaline finally catching up with her, but she refused to show it. A few kids came by her table to quietly thank her or offer a few words of support. One girl whispered, "You said what all of us have been too scared to say." Brill nodded, giving a soft thank you in return, but her mind wasn't on the compliments. She wondered if Jason would think twice before opening his mouth again, or if he would simply find another target. The thought made her chest tighten, but she pushed it aside for now. She had done what she could, but the real impact of her words wouldn't reveal itself until later, when the whispers turned into conversations no one had dared to have before. By the next day, Brill's confrontation was the talk of Roosevelt High. The cafeteria scene had spread like wildfire, retold with slight embellishments in every hallway and classroom. "Did you hear what Brill said to Jason?" She completely shut him down. I didn't know she had it in her. The story was on everyone's lips, and while some were quick to praise her bravery, others dismissed it as overreaction or unnecessary drama. Brill, however, carried on like nothing had changed. She walked through the halls with her head held high, greeting those she knew and ignoring the curious stares from others. She had no intention of feeding the frenzy or giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing her ruffled. But as she sat through her classes, she noticed something remarkable. People were talking not just about her, but about what had happened. In her English class, a boy raised his hand during a discussion and asked, "Why do you think people feel the need to tear others down? Is it jealousy or something deeper?" The teacher, taken aback but intrigued, steered the conversation into a deeper discussion about prejudice and insecurity. Brill kept quiet, listening as her classmates debated, some uncomfortably shifting in their seats, while others spoke passionately. Later during lunch, Brill noticed Jason sitting alone at his usual table. His friends had scattered, likely distancing themselves from the fallout of the previous day. She felt a twinge of pity for him, but it was fleeting. This was a consequence of his actions, a moment to reflect on the damage words could cause. Whether he chose to learn from it was up to him. But the real surprise came later that week. Brill was at her locker when Mira approached her, the last person she expected to see. Mira looked nervous, her fingers twisting the strap of her backpack. "Hey Brill," she said quietly. Brill raised an eyebrow but kept her tone neutral. "What's up?" Mira hesitated, then blurted out, I wanted to say I'm sorry for laughing." for not stopping him, I guess I thought. I don't know what I thought, it wasn't right. For a moment Brielle didn't know how to respond. Apologies weren't something she often received. In situations like this she studied Mia's face, looking for any sign of insincerity, but all she saw was guilt and regret. "Thank you," Brielle said. "Finally. It means something that you came to me and said that." Mia nodded, looking relieved. "I've been thinking about what you said. You're right, I didn't say anything because, well, I was scared, but that's not an excuse." Brielle smiled faintly. "It's not, but recognizing it is a start." Mia nodded again and walked away, leaving Brielle with a mix of emotions. She hadn't expected to change anyone's mind, let alone Jason's closest ally. Yet here they were, one small step towards something better. But even as individual moments of understanding unfolded, the deeper lesson was still taking root in the minds of those who had witnessed it all. By the end of the week, the cafeteria incident had evolved into something larger than a fleeting moment of high school drama. Teachers began addressing issues of respect and inclusivity in their classrooms, weaving the discussion into lessons and encouraging students to share their perspectives. The principal even made an announcement over the intercom, reminding everyone that Roosevelt High prided itself on being a community that valued kindness and understanding. For Brielle, life didn't magically become easier. There were still stares, whispered comments, and the occasional awkward exchange. But something had shifted. She walked through the halls with a little more ease, feeling less like an outsider and more like someone whose voice had been heard. People she barely knew would nod at her in passing, offering a silent acknowledgement of the stand she had taken. Jason, on the other hand, had faded into the background. His usual cocky swagger was gone, replaced by a subdued demeanor that made him almost unrecognizable. He avoided Brielle whenever their paths crossed, and while he never apologized, his silence spoke volumes. On a quiet afternoon, Brielle found herself sitting at the same cafeteria table where it all began. She stared out the window, her reflection merging with the vibrant full colors outside. Her best friend Taylor slid into the seat across from her, pulling her out of her thoughts. "You good?" Taylor asked, a knowing smile on her face. Brielle nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." Taylor grinned. "Good, because you were a freaking superhero this week." Brielle chuckled softly, shaking her head. "I don't know about that, I was tired of staying quiet sometimes." Taylor said, "That's all it takes. One person willing to speak up." Brielle's smile widened, a warmth spreading through her chest. She thought back to Mia's apology, to the quiet words of support from classmates she barely knew, and to the discussions that had sparked in classrooms and hallways. Maybe she hadn't changed the world, but she had started something, and that was enough for now. As she stood to leave, her gaze swept across the cafeteria. It was still chaotic, still loud, still filled with the usual cliques, but it felt different somehow, less divided, more aware. Brielle picked up her tray, her steps steady and sure as she headed for the exit. Before she left, she glanced back at Jason's table, now occupied by another group of students. He wasn't there for the first time. She felt a sense of peace, knowing she had reclaimed her own space, her own voice. Standing up for yourself may not always be easy, but it's one of the most empowering decisions you can make. Brielle's story is a testament to the power of words to spark change, and how silence can sometimes speak louder than anything. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs a little boost. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more inspiring stories that challenge us and remind us of the strength found in speaking our truth.